Normally, I stay away from videos like this because my channel is not about to shock people and be like, oh, we are witnessing the death of the Western civilization. The economy will collapse and it will bring us to the Stone Age, right? Usually, I just talk about what's in the news. But today, I want to talk about something that is not in the news, and I find it quite disconcerting, especially since there is an election going on in America right now, and I think that people should really be informed. Um, if you're following international politics, you should be extremely concerned by what is going on now. We are literally on the verge of World War III because, as you can see, according to the Daily Mail Online, Russia has already ordered all officials that are living abroad and their family to come back to Russia. Now, this is a action that usually takes place before all-out warfare. The only thing that needs to happen now, if it will be all-out war, would be for Russia to call their diplomats back home for consultation. This is usually the classical step that you get to see before a nation declares war on another nation. So also you need to take into account that President Putin, I think it was last week, he canceled a visit that he had in France with the leaders of France, and this is again very, very concerning. I will do my best to explain what goes on. I really like the memes that are on the internet. It's like Russia wants war, and look how close they put their country next to our military bases. And this is also funny. It's like America is here, American ship is here next to Russia, and this is Russian aggression, right? So I will do my best to explain what the situation is like, so that people who are watching this can get a vague idea. Now, take into account I'm not a person that's really good at explaining these things. So I'm going to do a half-assed job at explaining. So if you have a better explanation or a better place for people to get more informed, feel free to put it into the comment section of my video. Please correct me if I make any mistakes. But again, I'm just a guy who reads the news. I don't have a team to actually do research for me or anything like that, but I've been monitoring this very closely for a while now. And I think I do have at least a basic understanding of what's going on. So it all has to come down with oil and Syria, pretty much. Now, Syria is a country in the Middle East that doesn't have oil itself. However, if you want to take oil from the Middle East, it has to go through a pipeline which is located in Syria. So the Syrian government pretty much dictates which of the two major powers that are in play there is going to get the oil. Now, obviously, one of the powers is America and the other power is Russia. So what happened in Syria is that the current president, President Assad, allegedly attacked his own civilians using chemical weapons. Now, this accusation is made by the Americans, and if you look at the Americans' past accusations, they also accused Iraq of having nuclear weapons in the past, right? So I take it with a grain of salt. Again, you may believe that this is true, you may believe that it is not. There is a video of President Assad that I will place it on my comment section, which is him responding to journalists about the situation in Syria, and he seems quite reasonable. Now, that doesn't mean he did not attack his own civilians, of course, he probably did. But at least when you listen to him, he does make sense, and if he attacked his own civilians, then he is clearly a mastermind at doing this, because the way he handled the debate with the quite aggressive press that asked him really hardball questions, he managed to get away quite clean from it. So the Americans are saying that Assad is attacking Syria, attacking Syrian citizens, of course. And they need to police the world. So despite the fact that they don't have any trade agreement with Syria or anything like that, they are saying that no, we need to go there in order to stop the oppression from Assad against his own people. We need to go there and take down Assad so that the Syrian people aren't oppressed anymore. Now you would ask, why is America doing this? Fuck knows. They have absolutely no right invading another nation. They are not the world police, despite how much as they are trying to claim they are. They are not. And the problem with this is that Syria is allied with Russia. So the President Assad, which is now under attack by American forces, and not necessarily directly up till now, but recently the Syrian army was actually attacked by American airstrikes, has asked Russia for help. Now, Russia being Syria's allies, they are obliged by international treaty to come there and help. And they have sent soldiers, they have sent equipment in order to help Syria. Now, again, all it has to do with oil. America really doesn't give a fuck about the Syrian people. They don't care about policing Syria. And the reason they don't care is because there are other countries in the world that has even worse human violations than what go on in Syria. Even if you were to believe that the President Assad is using chemical weapons against his own people, you do know that in North Korea, Kim Jong-un is guilty of far more atrocities, yet you don't see American invading North Korea in order to establish order. Saudi Arabia has massive human rights violations towards women and towards its own citizens, chopping the hands off of thieves, doing public lashings and all of that. You don't see America going into Saudi Arabia, right? Because they don't care about the people. They care about the oil in this case. Now, you will wonder, why does America care about the oil so much? Why do, so many memes on the internet have to do with American having oil? There's even a meme that says, if Mars have oil, America would already been there spreading democracy to Mars. The answer is that the American dollar is backed in oil. Now, most countries have their currency backed in something, usually gold. Because money is something fictional. It doesn't really exist. Money is just paper. But they need to have some sort of backing in order to have value. The idea is that if you go to a bank with $1, you can get the equivalent of that dollar into gold. In the case of the American, you can get the equivalent into oil. So it's really important for America to keep having a constant oil supply in order to sustain their economy, which is based on oil. So when you have countries like Syria who don't want to play ball, or countries like Libya, or countries like Iraq who don't want to play ball, they are going to have democracy being spread to them really fast. Now let's talk about Russia a little bit. Russia has been a bit weakened as of late, as NATO has been expanding further and further up across its borders. And you can see in this map, which is made as a joke, but it's quite accurate when it shows the military bases that are placed around Russia. Russia is pretty much surrounded by NATO at this point. And in recent events, we also seen Ukraine trying to be destabilized by the European Union and the American CIA in order to make Ukraine more favorite to the European Union and to get them to sign up with NATO possibly in the future, so that there could be another military base placed on Ukraine. And you can notice the fact that Russia is really displeased by this whole situation. And recently in Russia, Putin is losing a lot of support. Now, the thing with Putin is that he is abusing the democratic system in Russia. He is constantly winning elections. Instead of stepping down, he decided to be prime minister for a while and then became president again. So he is really the dictator of Russia. Russia is Putin and Putin is Russia. But the problem with this is that the Russian people do admire a strong leader. They do admire strength above all. And the reason is that people in Russia are quite hardened people, being through poverty, being through communism. They are a very harsh and practical people. If Putin would come up one day pissing his eyes after a mass shooting or anything like that, similar to what Obama is doing, he would definitely lose a lot of support. He would definitely be viewed as a weak person. If there is a mass shooting in Russia, what the people want is for Putin to come out and have some very strong and firm consequences for what's going to happen if there's another mass shooting and how they are going to prevent further mass shootings from happening. That's what the Russian people expect. They don't expect Putin to come crying and whining on national television like the American people do. And because of this, because of the fact that Russia has lost a lot of territory, former territory of the USSR, Putin does appear quite weak, as well as the fact that the Russian economy is going down and other factors. It makes Putin look quite weak. So he now needs, if he wants to avoid possibly an uprising in the worst case scenario, he needs to show that Russia is still strong. He needs to show that Russia interests are still going to be maintained. He does not need only to do this for the people of Russia, but also for the oligarchy, the people that support him in power, and they invest money into Putin. So one of the things that he did lately was to invade Crimea. Again, if Ukraine would have fell to the NATO and to the European Union, pretty much, they would lose a massive strategic importance, which is the Crimean Peninsula. So he did take Crimea, and I wouldn't be surprised if during the American elections, Russia would actually do what Israel did and invade Ukraine. While there is chaos in America, while people are during the elections and there is the presidential exchange, he might actually try to invade Ukraine. Again, this is just a hypothetical scenario that I wouldn't be surprised if I'm going to see it. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, of course, but at the same time, if I see it happening, I'm not going to be shocked by it. I'm going to completely understand why this has happened. Now, in the case of Syria, lately, it has been revealed by WikiLeaks that America is supporting ISIS, and they're not only supporting it, but they're also funding it. So when I see things that, let's see where exactly this was. I think it was on another article I had, it was on another article I have, and I will put it in the link description. But recently, the Americans have did an airstrike on the Syrian army, and right after the airstrike, coincidentally, ISIS forces moved on. So you had an airstrike that pretty much decimated the Syrian army at the point, followed by a quick ISIS invasion of the region, which caused Russia to order all officials to pull back. And not only that, but they also stopped every single collaboration with the United States. So every economic, every treaty that Russia and the United States had are now null. There is absolutely no more collaboration on any channel between Russia and the United States. The only single thing that still exists is the Russian embassy in the United States and the American embassy in Russia. So as you can see, the tensions are incredibly high. Now, besides all of this, what also happened is that Russia has installed anti-air missiles in Syria. So if another plane flies over and tries to bomb the Syrian army, it's going to be shot down. If a plane by the United States or NATO gets shot down by Russia with an anti-air missile, it's World War III pretty much. So this is how bad the situation is right now. And I hope you can understand the stakes here. Right? So, as we can see, the mainstream media, according to this article at least, is devoting almost all of their time and energy to covering the Trump and Clinton debates. Most Americans don't realize that the Obama administration is bringing us perilously close to war with Russia. On Friday, Barack Obama is going to sit down with his foreign policy team and discuss military options in Syria. So pretty much it's going to come down to Friday. Now, take into account that I think the only reason Russia isn't mobilizing troops right now is because they are waiting to see the elections in the United States. Because if Trump wins, Trump actually said that he is going to discuss matters with Putin. And I do think that he might try to de-escalate the situation. While Hillary, from what I am seeing, is doing nothing but to further agitate Russia. She not only blames her hacking computer on Russian hackers, despite the fact that there is absolutely no evidence to support such a thing, but she is quite outraged on the very idea that Trump wants to discuss things with Russia. And you can see this during the presidential debate. She was mocking Donald Trump for trying to discuss things with Russia. Now, I don't understand why this is a bad thing. I mean, during diplomacy, discussions are very important. the Russian is still a major power in the world, not as strong as America, of course, but they're also allied with China and Iran. So it would lead to a conflict, which I do believe Russia would lose in the end, but there would be a colossal loss of human lives, equipment, the economy is going to take a hit. I don't understand why it's something shocking that you would want to talk with Russia. So I'm not really surprised when a person in the Kremlin who is a nationalist and he is renowned for being outspoken and saying outrageous things, to say that vote Trump or risk nuclear war, because I do believe that Russia is trying to back on Donald Trump in this, because he is the only presidential candidate that actually wants to sit down and have a discussion. So he is also not representative of the interests that Hillary Clinton is. You need to understand, Hillary Clinton is being backed by Saudi Arabia. Like, a lot of the campaign money that's being funded for Hillary Clinton campaign comes from Saudi Arabia, who would like the current Assad regime in Syria to be dethroned. Other money comes from different companies, different international things, which is technically illegal in American law to sponsor, to bring money from a foreign country into American politics. However, they did find a loophole where they are paying into Clinton's private organization. So there is that. And reading forward, as you will see below, the options under considering include direct strikes on Syrian military bases. If the Americans would do direct strikes on Syrian military bases, they would be shot down by the Russian anti-air equipment that's being deployed there. And the thing with this is, I don't believe Russia would just deploy anti-air equipment as a hoax, as a gotcha thing, because you have to understand this equipment is extremely expensive. You can't just deploy it and not use it. If you have deployed it there, you are going to use it. You have to explain to your investors why you have deployed it. Russia had already pledged to respond militarily to any direct strike on Syrian forces. And so the decision that Barack Obama makes regarding Syria on Friday could literally be the spark that sets World War III. The daily drama surrounding Trump and Clinton is far less important than a potential war with Russia. This should be the front page news on every single nation around the world. But unfortunately, most of the big news organizations are giving it very little coverage. If you are watching CNN, for instance, they have dedicated, if I'm not mistaken, at least 3 hours of coverage on the Donald Trump locker room banter. This is what the media considers important news, right? Just so it can go into your brain. This is what the media considers that it's important news for the public, while the situation with Russia and Syria, that's, oh, well, we can't talk about that because then people might vote wrong. So if Barack Obama decides to directly hit Syrian military, that will be crossing a red line that Russia has already established. And unlike Obama, Russia actually takes their red lines deadly serious. And this is true. I've been following the history of Russia. When Russia says they will do something, they actually do it. I don't see any reason why they won't follow up on the ultimatum that they have already given. So in my recent article entitled "Russia is Preparing for Nuclear War," I quoted from a major Russian news source that demonstrates what the Russians are thinking at this point. The Russians recently deployed additional S-300 and S-400 air defense systems in Syria, and they have warned that any strike against Syrian forces would put Russian personnel in danger. Honestly, imagine if this was any different. Imagine if China would try to invade Japan, and Japan would ask for America for help. Do you honestly think that America would hesitate to shoot down any Chinese jet flying over Japan? Because the situation is quite similar. You have a country asking an ally for help, right? They had the treaty with Russia before all this shit. Before America started to meddle with this. It was Russia's zone of influence. And now they are stepping on Russians' toes. So Russia did nothing when America invaded Iraq. Russia did nothing when America came into Afghanistan. But I guess they decided that enough is enough. Now we are going to exercise our military might if America is going to come any closer. So if Obama administration is insane enough to start ordering airstrike against Syrian position, let us hope and pray that the Russians are willing to back down and show restraint. Because if Russian S-300 and S-400 air defense systems start shooting down US military aircraft, that could set off a chain of events that might be unstoppable. For example, the Kremlin has ordered all officials to return to Russia as soon as possible. I already showed you the news from CNN. In addition, the Russian recently concluded an unprecedented civil defense drill that involved 40 million people. Now, when you do a civil defense drill that involves 40 million people, you have to understand this costs a lot of money. You can't just do this for the lulz. And especially in an economy that's as bad as Russia, making a civil defense drill involving 40 million people is quite expensive. So they are actually preparing for war. This is... I don't know how else I can stress the importance of this thing. Here in the United States, we never have those kind of drills, and there isn't even anywhere for the general population to go in the event of a nuclear war. If and when the missiles start falling, the only thing that will be left to do is to say our prayers and kiss our family goodbye. Now, I don't believe there is going to be a nuclear war. The reason is that if World War III were to start, it will be a case very similar to World War II. Now, in World War II, both parties had access to plenty of mustard and sarin gas because it was a very effective tactic to use. You would just launch a bomb that would have gas, and everyone that did not have a gas mask, even that was outside of the blast radius, could be killed. But they didn't use it. They didn't use it because they saw how horrible it was and how devastating it was during World War I. So, despite the fact that both parties had access to chemical gas, and despite the fact that there was absolutely no laws that were supposed to stop the parties from using this, they had quite a gentleman's agreement, if you will. And despite the fact that the United Kingdom constantly prepared and had drills and even baby masks were being made available for babies to be able to breathe in case of a gas attack, Hitler never bombed the United Kingdom. They never sent gas attacks in London, and it would have been quite easy. All they had to do was to modify a V-2 rocket with a mustard gas payload, and they could have sent it into London, right? But they didn't. And the British didn't do it either. So I honestly think in World War III it would be similar, because the moment you start flying nukes, you are going to cause quite a stir. Like, if you fire one nuke, you might get 5 back. But then again, no one knows. I mean, you can't guarantee this, and obviously no one wants to use nukes, because, first of all, pretty much every single equipment that is in a standard modern army is resilient to EMP strikes. So most of the equipment that NATO is going to use is probably going to have EMP protection, and possibly some of the tanks are going to be protected against radiation. So unless you fire a direct hit into an opposing military force, the nukes are going to be rather ineffective. Now, what you can do is to fire a nuke into a town that has quite important economic strategic importance. So you can fire a town, let's say, that connects a lot of railroads, and then it's going to be very difficult to move the troops around. You are going to pretty much cause area of denial. But if the idea in a war is that if you conquer a nation, you still want to use its resources, you still want to take advantage of its economy, otherwise you're going to conquer a wasteland, which is why I don't think people are going to use nuclear missiles in this scenario. But if you think about it, the war is going to mostly be fought in the Middle East, and Russia has no interest in conquering Europe, so they could fire nuclear missiles into the United States or in Europe, depending how crazy and depending on the whims of the people that are the generals and they're leading the war. If they find out, oh, it's going to be really good for us, I mean, if they are going to say, we have really good anti-air defense, so yeah, we might fire 100 nukes and hope one hits, because we know if they fire 100 nukes towards us, we can hit them all down in the sky. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it is a pretty dark scenario, but I do think that it's not going to World War III is not going to involve nukes. Plus, the idea of a nuke is something that's quite romanticized recently in a lot of TV shows and in a lot of comic books and whatnot. I think they exaggerate a lot of the power of an actual nuke. Now, I'm not saying that a nuke is not something to be quite scared of, but I do think the media is hyping up this weapon more than it should be. Now, how would World War III work, right? Why is it important for you as an American citizen to care about a World War III? First of all, no one knows how World War III is going to be fought, because all of the wars that we had up till now were usually between a superpower and a minor nation. And usually the war is only fought one-sided, right? Like when the Americans went into Iraq, you could do drone strikes, you can just send in some planes and bomb the population there. Sure, you are going to send some ground troops, of course, but they're really no match. I mean, the Iraqi rebels are really no match for what you're going to send against them. So it's a kind of warfare where it's one-sided. But imagine if, let's say, America and China would start fighting. Now, the problem is that in today's world, the anti-air from either America or China are very, very good. It's very hard to pass a drone over a nation that has really good anti-air. It's very hard to fly a plane over a nation that has state-of-the-art anti-air. So it will lead to ground warfare. And the problem with this is that when it comes to operating technology in a ground warfare, you need people that are trained to do it. It's not like in World War II where you just give like a random GI, you give him a semi-automatic machine gun and you point him in their direction and he goes there with a bazooka and he starts conquering territory. No. You need people who are really trained into managing the high state-of-the-art equipment that you are giving them. So from what I understand and from what I've read online, and it's very hard to make a sense of it because there's a lot of propaganda that's either pro-American or pro-Russian. The issue is that if the first invasion force, which is probably the NATO fast response team, if they fail and if they take severe losses, it's going to be extremely hard and it's going to take a lot of time until you can train new people to use the equipment. Again, the problem isn't necessarily having the equipment, it's training people to use the equipment. I mean, just imagine how difficult it is to have the personnel capable in piloting an aircraft carrier. I mean, from what I understand, China does have some aircraft carriers, but they still lack the personnel in order to use them efficiently. So if the first NATO fast response team fails, and it turns out that Russia can hold them off, it might actually lead to, again, trench warfare, which I don't know how to explain how shitty this situation would be, right? And you would have trench warfare that has extremely good anti-air, nothing can fly over it. Pretty sure there's going to be no satellites flying in the air because it's very easy to shoot down a satellite. I mean, they have a trajectory where you know where it's going to be. All you have to do is to fire a rocket from the ground and it's going to hit the satellite when it's supposed to go over that particular trajectory. No satellites means no GPS, no communication, the internet might be affected. Like, I really don't know how to stress how bad World War III is going to be, even for a citizen that stays at home, right? I'm not talking about actually going and fighting, Jesus Christ. No, like, just staying at home. Your economy is going to take a huge dip. Again, the internet is going to probably suffer because most likely there's going to be very little satellites flying, and the ones that are going to be flying are going to be remade for military purposes, not civilian entertainment, obviously. Hacking is going to be a thing. There's going to be a new state of warfare where hacking is like you will have Russian hackers actually hacking America and American hackers trying to stave off and hack back. It's not going to be good for the common citizen. Definitely. Even if you're not involved in the war. Even if you think, oh, well, America, fuck yeah, we're going to beat them. You probably are going to beat them. I'm not saying that Russia is going to manage to beat America, but the actual war is going to be horrible. We have not seen such a war since World War II. Never before have two state-of-the-art military clash between each other. So no one knows what's going to happen. Absolutely no one. No one knows the secret weapons that Russia might come up with or America might come up with. And definitely if it's a war, it's going to be between Russia, China, Iran on one side, plus their satellites, versus America and NATO. It's going to encompass the entire world. It's going to be atrocious. Horrible. So, my advice to the American people: vote this election. Know what you are voting for. And try to inform other people about this. You can find these articles on CNN. Put them on your Facebook. Just show that you give a shit. Honestly, don't stay during this election and be like, oh, well, who cares? Someone else is going to vote for me. No, move your ass. I know it's difficult. You have to raise your ass from your chair. I sympathize. I understand. It's very difficult to get your ass up and go out there and put a stamp. It's difficult, but please do it. You are talking about the future of I would say the world, but actually it is the future of the world, especially the economical future of the world. Even if this doesn't lead to all-out warfare, which I hopefully pray it doesn't, though watching the current events, I don't see anyone backing down. I never know that Hillary has ever de-escalated a situation in her entire career, except the Iran situation, which she didn't really de-escalate, she just staved off. So even if this does not lead to war, it's going to make the relationships between Russia and America to the Cold War era. And I'm not sure this is really good for the common American citizen, or for any citizen of the world for that matter.